What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about one of the most highly anticipated films of the year, and without a doubt one of the most long awaited sequels of all time, and that film is called Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Directed once again by Tim Burton, this film has a returning cast of people like Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, and some new faces in the mix like Jenna Ortega, Willem Dafoe, Monica Bellucci, and more. And before we get too far into this review, in case any of you have not already checked it out, I just recently did a retrospective review on the original Beetlejuice film from 1988. I had a lot of fun doing that video, going back and revisiting one of my favorite Tim Burton films of all time, a film that was definitely pivotal in me getting into filmmaking, especially when it comes to practical effects as a young kid. So today we're going to be talking about one of the most long-awaited sequels, coming nearly 40 years since the original film, just a few years shy of that. It's crazy that it's been over 30 years. I just turned 31. The movie came out before I was even born, and so it's always been part of like the cultural zeitgeist for me. So to know that the second movie had taken this long to make, it was something that people wanted for many years. It's exciting to know that it's finally here. But I'm sure a lot of you guys are questioning, is it what we've always wanted? Is it what we've expected after all these years? And before we get into my personal thoughts on the movie, let's talk a little bit about what this movie is all about. The movie opens up and we're reintroduced, of course, to Winona Ryder as Lydia Dietz, as well as Catherine O'Hara as Delia Dietz, and we're also introduced for the first time to Jenna Ortega as Astrid Dietz, the daughter of Winona Ryder's character Lydia, who are in a bit of an estranged relationship. After an unfortunate and unexpected family tragedy that ends up bringing them back to Winter River, they end up finding themselves in a situation that gets them in the mix with Beetlejuice and the world of the undead once again. And since I'm getting this review out to you guys ahead of its official release, I'm going to keep it at that. I'm going to keep the narrative fairly vague here. If you've seen the trailer, I'm sure you can kind of decipher some of the elements, but I do think some of the later trailers that we've received for this film have shown just a little bit too much, so I don't want to give you guys too many details in terms of the overall plot. What I can start this off by saying when it comes down to my thoughts as this film, not only as a sequel to Beetlejuice, but also as a Tim Burton film, I think in a lot of ways this film showcases what Tim Burton is all about. The wacky, whimsical, crazy, bizarre worlds that he's able to show us, these places he's able to take us, and of course the aesthetics that are true to who Tim Burton is. Similar to the original film, there's a fantastic use of practical effects throughout the course of the film, as well as a great use of costume design, set design, locations that are used, and a lot that just gives you that practical sense that you want out of a Beetlejuice sequel. There isn't as much of the claymation stop motion as I was hoping there would be, though there is a little bit of it, and there are digital effects that are used in this one which weren't used as heavily in the first film, but I do think that the digital effects here blend in really well with the aesthetic of the practical effects, especially with most of this being very wacky, colorful, and vibrant, similar to that original film, especially when we're in the world of the undead. So when it comes down to the look of this film, both on a cinematography level and all the effects and costume design and the makeup that brought all of these characters to life in this film, I think you have a really solid looking and well put together film on that level. Outside of that, I found the sound design for this film to be really solid as well, and has a beautiful musical score once again given to us by Danny Elfman that's able to capture that Tim Burton essence, very much following up the musical score that we heard in the original Beetlejuice, and feels like it has its own unique identity. So many moments in this film are really established by that fantastic Danny Elfman score, and there are certain moments right out of the gate of this film that completely let you know what the tone of this film is going to be, simply because of that score. So when you combine that Tim Burton visuals with the Danny Elfman score, you have what completely feels like a Tim Burton and Danny Elfman collaboration that we all know and love. On top of that, you have a great cast here, of course, with a lot of returning actors. I think Winona Ryder was great in this film, once again as the character of Lydia Dietz. Catherine O'Hara came back to just be over the top, just like her character was in the first one. Jenna Ortega, of course, now after the success of the Netflix show Wednesday that she also did with Tim Burton, is in the mix here, and I thought that for the most part she was a very charming and endearing character throughout the course of the film. Willem Dafoe is a new face that's in the mix here as well, who was an actor before he died, unfortunately because of a stunt that of a movie that he was a part of, and now serves as a detective in the world of the dead. He led to some of the funniest moments in the movie for me, without a doubt. Of course, you have Michael Keaton in the mix as Beetlejuice, who I think brings that charm and that charisma that he brought into the first film. In a lot of ways, though, because he is a lot older and we know where he is as an actor now versus when he did that original film, it doesn't feel as fresh as it did in that first film, but I do think think he's having a lot of fun here, and I think his performance here is really solid. I think some people might call it a little bit one note at times, but for the most part, it feels true to who that character was originally. It feels like he slipped right back into the shoes, and I really enjoy being able to see Michael Keaton in an entire Beetlejuice movie again. He really had a lot of fun playing this role. That much is clear to me, and I really thoroughly enjoyed all the scenes with him. And I like that, similar to the original film, they don't jam-pack him into a lot of the movie. He has about the same amount of runtime as he did in the original film, which allows him to be utilized just the right amount. Another character to talk about who's a new one in the mix here is you have Justin Theroux as the character of Rory, a boyfriend and business associate of Lydia, Winona Ryder's character. I'll just go ahead and be clear here, I honestly didn't really like. I felt like the narrative around him and Lydia throughout the course of the film really didn't work for me. I found he was without a doubt my least favorite part of the film. I don't really have anything negative to say about the performance. I think it was definitely something he was directed to do. But when it comes down to the writing, I wasn't really crazy about his character and the involvement of him in any of these sequences. And it oftentimes made me wish that we were kind of diverting from that storyline altogether. And then the last new character that's definitely notable to talk about here, and I won't get into any other characters because I don't want to give any spoilers, is the character of Dolores, who is our big antagonist of the film. I'm sure you guys have seen her through the trailers. She's played by Monica Bellucci, and she holds a very significant place in the past of Beetlejuice and finds herself reanimated and on a quest for vengeance. And that's all I'll say about her character. Without a doubt, she was one of the coolest parts of the movie. Visually, I thought her performance was really cool, and very much she fit into that over-the-top Beetlejuice Tim Burton style. But unfortunately, she was a character I found myself not as invested in as the movie went on, because I felt like she really didn't have much to do other than kind of looming in the shadows and being this threat that ultimately never really became a threat to me. With all that said, I do really want to praise the filmmaking of this film. I think Tim Burton brings a lot of his energy here, along with the other collaborators that he's worked with in previous films, whether it be the actors, Danny Elfman, and the various other people who are part of making this film feel like it does. When it comes down to the overall narrative, that's where I'm torn, if I'm completely and utterly honest, because on one hand, this film is exactly what I wanted it to be as a sequel to Beetlejuice. It has that bizarre, wacky tone that made the first film awesome. And I think part of what made that first film awesome for me, and even on rewatch recently, is the less is more model. Just the idea that that first film is very simplistic. It doesn't have a whole lot going on. It is a very straightforward story with a small set of characters, and there really isn't an abundance going on. This film for me felt like it just had too many storylines that we're following, whether it be Lydia and her boyfriend Rory, whether it be the relationship between the character of Lydia and her daughter played by Jenna Ortega, Astrid, and their estranged relationship, whether it be the family tragedy that they're currently dealing with, the elements that bring Beetlejuice into the mix, the fact that there is this woman who's now been resurrected, Dolores, who's out for vengeance in the world of the undead, and way more that goes on in this film that I'm not saying here for spoiler purposes. I think that this movie just had too much on its plate, and I haven't even really scraped the surface of all the elements that this film features because it would lean into spoilers. But by the time I got to the end of the movie, I felt myself saying I liked the film. I found it to be a really solid sequel and follow-up to the original Beetlejuice, but it does feel like one of those sequels that came out way down the line and just doesn't feel like it has that same magic that the original film had. With that said, I didn't go into this film expecting it to have the same magic, nor did I expect to feel the same way as I did from that original film, even on rewatch recently. I didn't expect to have that same feeling watching this. And so on one hand, I'm really impressed with the filmmaking here. It was nice to be in that world again. It was nice to see these characters again and have a story within that world. On another hand though, it did feel at times that it leaned a little bit too much into the bizarre. I would say that if you're like me and you're a big fan of Tim Burton and you love things like Edward Scissorhands, or you love things like Corpse Bride, things like Sweeney Todd or Ed Wood, some of the earlier stuff in his career that was, really pivotal for him, but then some of those weird offbeat ones in the mix like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or something like Dark Shadows, or the Miss Peregrine School for whatever. If those movies didn't really click for you as much, but those other ones I mentioned click for you, then I think that you're going to find yourself at a bit of a torn place similar to where I was with this film. There are parts of his filmography that I love, that I saw in this film, and then there are parts of his filmography that I'm not super crazy about that I also saw in this film. And I think really when it comes down to it, I was impressed with the filmmaking. It was story choices and the amount of storylines that we're following that ultimately I think held this film back from being as strong as it possibly could be. But with all that said, I do think a lot of Beetlejuice fans are going to have a great time with this film. I think there's going to be a lot of laughs to be had. Willem Dafoe, without a doubt, is the funniest part part of this film for me, and I think Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, and even Jenna Ortega in the mix here do a great job of making this feel like a legacy sequel that very much honors that original film and has a special place in film history now as we move forward. But I also don't think this is a film that's going to work for everybody. The first Beetlejuice is one that I think everybody needs to see, whether you love it or you don't. I think it's definitely a movie that's worth watching. It's an admirable film for its time. This is one that I can see some people just flat out not enjoying as much because of how weird and bizarre it gets in certain places and how crammed the narrative is at times, that oftentimes doesn't let certain storylines breathe or has resolutions that don't feel all that impactful. Again, I think it's really going to depend on the individual, but as I was walking out of the theater that I saw it in, which was a mix of press and public screening for first come first serve for people who were able to come see the movie, I was just listening to some of the people as we were walking out. There were some people that said they loved it, and then there were some people that were saying things like, I didn't not like it, or I did not love it, I just wasn't as crazy about it. And I think there's going to be a lot of that. I think this is going to be one that's divisive. This isn't one of those long-awaited sequels where I can tell you guys, I think you're all going to love it. Go watch it immediately. You're all going to have a great time. This is going to service all Beetlejuice fans. I do think there are going to be people who love this, but I also think there's going to be people who are pretty turned off by this movie and how bizarre and weird and jam-packed it feels at times, and how it kind of loses that sense of simplicity that made the original great. And then there's probably going to be a lot of people like me that are right in the middle. There was a lot about this film I really enjoyed, almost loved, but there's a lot about this film that I also found myself kind of going, I don't know how much I really like that, or that didn't really feel like it needed to be there. So that's going to be my thoughts on Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. As you can see, a film I'm a bit torn on, but a film that I would say I'm overall positive on. I enjoyed it a lot more than I disliked it. It's a film that I do recommend if you're a fan of the original film, and I look forward to hearing the various opinions on this one. This is one that I don't think I'll necessarily fight, to the death over. If somebody tells me they love it, somebody tells me they hate it, I think I'll understand it either way. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.